When a person hears the word wave, they might think of waves of the ocean. Or maybe a hand wave. Perhaps they'll imagine sound waves. The average League of Legends player probably thinks about gold, EXP, or pain. If you have no knowledge of wave management, you might have been in scenarios like being frozen on by a Darius while playing Nasus, got zoned from the wave losing EXP and gold with no help in sight before you started contemplating why on earth are you playing top lane. I'll ask another question. Have you ever been tower dived and ever questioned why? If your answers are yes, then let's talk about wave management. We will discuss these topics with a main focus on wave management in top lane, but we'll occasionally dip into the general laning stuff. There's a lot of what if scenarios when it comes to laning and wave management, so I can't cover everything, but I'll obviously try to cover as much as possible. And we're going to start with this very obvious but useful concept. With no intervention from champions, the minion waves in Summoner's Rift at the start are mirrored. They meet smack bang in the middle along the dotted line on the minimap. Why do we start with this concept? Well, when you play in Summoner's Rift, you obviously aren't going to have vision of the entire map. But by looking at your own minion waves, you can try and visualize where the enemy waves are going to be. So in this specific scenario, by looking at my second wave, I know the enemy's second wave will reach the fight before mine does. Which leads to the first topic, wave positions. The position of the waves fighting can dictate which wave will push. In this case, we have no champions hitting the wave and the same amount and type of minions. But because the wave is positioned to red side, they will get their wave reinforcements first, which constitutes to a push. In real Summoner's Rift games, you won't always have the same amount of minions clashing due to champions pushing and CSing, but you get the idea. If the waves are positioned by the enemy tower, the enemy wave will get their reinforcements faster, and the enemy tower might also be in range, which means your wave dives faster, resulting in a fast push. If the waves aren't as close to the enemy tower, then you'll just get a slow push. What ultimately matters is knowing that the wave will push to you. With no interference, the wave will eventually crash, which means it hits the tower. It will then proceed to bounce, which means it will push the other way because of reinforcements, blah 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 blah. This cycle of crashing and bouncing will continue given no interference. There's also a difference between a good and a bad crash. A good crash is when the wave is stacked, which means it has a lot of minions, and it focuses the tower before the enemy wave arrives. A bad crash, on the other hand, has the wave not reach the tower and the enemy wave intercepts it in time. So why is this bad? Well, the crashing wave will focus the enemy wave, and if you aren't in range, you won't be able to last hit the minions. If you stay and try to push the wave afterwards, you'll be susceptible to ganks. Whereas if you recall, you'll lose the XP. Not exactly a cash money move. If the enemy champion is there, they might also freeze, but more on that soon. To avoid bad crashes, play with your level advantages if you have them, to ensure you have priority over the wave. Look at your own waves to see when the enemy waves come to know when to push. In this scenario, I delay the push to ensure my wave doesn't reach the tower and I can get the third wave in as well. Don't forget to walk your wave to the tower, otherwise the enemy might hold it and allow their wave to intercept. If you do find yourself in a bad crash, you can either try to push the wave in, stay in range of the XP and wait for the bounce, or just play for the 2v1 because you're better. I'm not. You can also just call your jungler for a counter gank if they're topside and you know you're getting ganked. In the worst case scenario where their jungler has path top and yours hasn't, you will need to take the loss and recall. You will lose a bit of EXP inevitably, but the wave will bounce back and push to you. Now, if you manage to get a good crash in, you have a couple of options to go with. The first is just recalling. If your lane opponent doesn't have good wave clear, you can go for a recall. By the time you come back to lane, the wave will have bounced but not reached your tower. At this point, you can try and kill your enemy laner with your new items and ideally a jungle gank if they don't have TP. This will force their TP though if they have it, though you'll be less likely to kill them as they would have healed and have new items like you. Outside of good crashes, a general recall timer is recalling on cannon waves, as these are harder to clear early for opponents, which means you can catch the wave by the time you come back if they've tried to crash it. Recalling after kills is also a very important option. For example, when the wave is in the center but pushing to you, you can recall it to catch it when or before it crashes into your tower. Be aware that you might need to chip down the wave if it's too big before you back. 2 to 3 minions more than your wave is generally enough. If your wave is close to crashing, then it's often worth pushing it for the bounce after, especially if they don't have TP, as they will lose EXP from the minions dying to tower. Avoid greeting for multiple tower plates though if your laner is up a few seconds before you've crashed, even more so if they have TP. They can stop your back and maybe even set up a tower dive if you don't have TP. If there's crystal build-up, you can just hit it once and recall. In other cases, you might need to take a loss, like when the enemy jungler is ganking soon or your wave is pushing from your tower and they have TP while being up soon. If you stick around and try to crash the wave, you will usually be punished. In this specific clip though, Garen doesn't have TP, the enemy jungler is bot, the next wave is not cannon, and his death timer is not short. So, I choose to crash the wave. Death timers, junglers, cannon waves, TP, and even boots can influence the correct choice. Keep these factors in mind though, whenever you decide to crash or recall, and try to recognize wave states. Experience is your best mentor here. Another option after a good crash is proxying. Proxying is when you sit behind one of the enemy laner's towers and take the minions. It's something that should only really be done if you have inbuilt wave clear like Garen with his E-spin or Sion's Q. Balmy Cinder items and Tiamat items like Ravenous Hydra and Stridebreaker also supplement this. You also need to be somewhat aware where the jungler and mid laner are so you don't get ganked and give them a kill. So what are the benefits to proxying? Well, the enemy laner has to decide whether to last hit minions or stop you. If they try to hold the wave ahead of their tower but have no wave clear or sustain, they'll burn through their HP and mana and eventually they have to recall. Meanwhile, if they try to last hit by tower, the tower takes damage, which can give you plate gold if you're nearby. If they try to chase and fight you when they have minions at their tower, then they'll lose the gold and potentially the EXP if they are out of range. The final nail in the coffin is that they'll lose role quest EXP if they go behind their tower, at around this boundary. If you find yourself getting ganked, you can recall, leave, or execute. Executing is fine early on as the death timers are shorter. By the time you recall or revive, you can generally reach the wave before it crashes, the same scenario as recalling normally. A quick note that a general recall timer for proxying is after you clear cannon wave. Now, the general third option after a good crash is the most lethal. It's tower diving. Tower diving is when you kill your opponent under the tower. Having a jungler assist if they're pathing towards you helps a lot. Champions with large amounts of CC or champions that can reset the tower aggro are very good for tower diving. For example, Elise is very good at tower diving because her spider form E can reset the tower aggro. But also her human form stun does not deal damage, so even if you land it, you don't take tower aggro. Renekton and Nidalee are also a very good champion combo. Renekton lands his stun, and Nidalee just throws the spear afterwards. Regardless, anyone can tower dive with enough damage. When you kill your opponent on the tower with a wave, they lose the minion gold and EXP that their wave or the tower kills. This is huge for creating an advantage. Unless you have a bounty, killing each other is still a net plus as well. You can of course tower dive with a single wave, but stacked waves are better as they lose more EXP and gold. Now, whenever the wave bounces to you in all of these scenarios, you can follow through with something called freezing. Not this kind though, but this kind. Freezing is when you hold the enemy wave from crashing into your tower either by holding the wave or the enemy laner not clearing the previous wave in time. Freezing holds multiple benefits. You aren't in an exposed spot, so you're not easily gankable barring the closest brushes, while your opponent is exposed if they walk up. If you're a lot stronger than your lane opponents, you can also zone them from the wave.
He's just standing there, menacingly!
Zoning is when you stand in front of the waves and stop your lane opponents from last hitting the minions, and if you can, stop them from getting in EXP range. EXP range for dying minions is 1500 units, so roughly here. Creating a level difference between you and your opponent is one way of creating a lead in top lane. This is because the stats you get from leveling up are roughly equivalent to 600 gold. This can definitely give you the edge in fights. Now, whenever you're freezing, you'll have to cut down the wave in order to hold its position without tanking too much damage. A general rule of thumb is holding 3 caster minions at these positions once your wave is dead. Remember that you can reset minion aggro by entering unwarded brushes. This can definitely help in positioning the freeze. So, we just talked about all these scenarios that you can follow through with after a good crash. But in some scenarios you'll just crash one wave with no cannon, so what can you do here? The first thing is fast pushing the wave and ensuring the crash. Outside of just waiting for the next wave, you can typically go for a deep jungle ward to get vision. If the enemy jungler is low and or your jungler is nearby, you could invade them. The other choice is going for the honey fruits plant, which spawns at 6 to 6.5 minutes. These grant health and mana or fury, so you can take an aggressive trade before getting the fruit, or just take it to deny from your enemy. So far we've discussed tower diving, freezing and proxying, but with the nature of top lane, you're going to be on the other side at times. So how do you respond to these scenarios? Let's start with proxies. In the average scenario, you'll be last hitting on the tower. Chasing champions you know you won't kill will lose you EXP and gold. But if you have a combat sum and or you know your damage, you can definitely give it a go. More so if your jungler is pathing towards you. If your champion can proxy though, you can hit them with one of these. Yep, you can just proxy while they proxy. Generally the best choice if both junglers are pathing away from the top side. You kinda just handshake on waves. As for tower diving, you have a couple of ways to deal with it. The first is just literally hand stiffing them. Outplay them. An easy choice for some. Another choice would be to ward in good spots and tracking the enemy jungler. Warding Krugs and these bushes, as well as just taking notes where the jungle is, will stop you from getting caught off guard. If you know you're about to be tower dived, you can back off and lose minions, which is better than just dying generally. If you have TP, then you can just recall and TP back if you're low on HP. Don't do this if you're going to end up in a 1v4 though. In the scenario where the jungler is also diving behind you and you're much stronger, you can hold the wave and stop it from crashing. Good junglers will stop your wave from intercepting, so this can be a good response. Meanwhile, during freezes, you have plenty of options to choose, so let's split through them. The first is just soaking EXP. In some cases you have to take the loss, especially if you know your jungler isn't top and theirs is. If your jungler is top though, you can ask them to push the wave, ask them for a lane gank or counter gank if you know the enemy jungler will gank you. If you're capable of ganking on a champion like Camille for example, you can roam mid or fake roam mid. Basically, just walk into river and stay out of vision. Players that don't call your bluff will break the freeze, so you can just walk back top. If you aren't a ganking champion though, that's fine. Staying out of vision for extended periods may make your enemy assume you're backing, so they might break the freeze anyways. You need to ensure that they have no vision of you though. If your champion is capable of proxying, you can also proxy. They'll be forced to respond as you aren't losing minions anymore. Just be wary of the enemy jungler and a roaming mid laner. Ideally, you don't want to get into freezes to begin with. Time your hard pushes, aka when you rapidly clear the wave. Hard push when your wave is stacked and when the latest waves have met to ensure crashes. One last option for breaking freezes overlaps with our next topic, wave manipulation, which involves a bit of mind control. Essentially, if your enemy laner has AoE abilities like Darius Q, you can bait them into using them to break the freeze. The other mind control ability involves single target abilities and autos. If you're in range of minions and the enemy laner uses one of these two things, they will draw minion aggro. So if your minions start hitting them, they are no longer hitting the enemy wave. The enemy wave will then proceed to push into your side, which you can then freeze to farm in a safe spot. This trick can be used on the other side as well. When you auto a champion, you can draw minion aggro and pull the wave, which can allow you to access minions from a safe distance, specifically casters and cannon. Proceed to stack and push waves for level ups and or crash the wave. You can also induce pushes by holding the wave away from the center of the lane if you aren't afraid of the enemy laner. This can be done on the first wave to counter the mid EXP cheese strat. The enemy wave will focus one minion of your wave and they'll lose out on the EXP. If you find that you've mistimed the push but the enemy laner isn't around, you can just block the enemy wave by walking past the tower to ensure the crash. Our last tech is quite niche, but I'm going to mention it anyways. In the rare scenario where you want your enemy laner to walk up further from the tower but not expose yourself to ganks, you can auto a melee minion before it hits your wave and drag it to the center. This will bring the wave closer to the center and your enemy laner if they walk up. This is niche for a reason though. It's much easier to do this on blue side. You do it when you're playing hyper-aggressive champions but you can't tower dive. It's not something you should do on the first 3 waves either because cheater recalling is better. But more importantly, proxying is an even better option due to the role quest interaction. And just to reiterate, it's not something to really ponder. I've included this in case somebody asks. Our final topic of this video is going to be on the first 3 waves. How you play the first 3 can influence the rest of your lane. Though we are going to focus on some specific wave scenarios, so no talk on level up timers and such. The first thing is cheater recalling. If you have dominance over your lane opponent due to the matchup or playing well, you can stack up a third wave crash. Typically, you last hit the second wave, then fast push and crash the third wave. This gives you time to recall and come back with an item advantage. You can then freeze the bounce and look for a kill with maybe a jungle gank if your jungler is pathing top. This is especially good against those without TP. I'm going to list this again just to make it a bit easier. Play for dominance and for level ups. Last hit the second wave, then hard push the third/cannon wave to ensure it crashes, and so they can't tank it before the fourth wave arrives. Then you recall, buy an item, run back to lane and try to freeze the wave. Cheater recalling allows you to full heal and get an item advantage over your opponent. The other scenario is proxying, where you crash the second wave or third wave if you know the enemy jungler is pathing bot side. You need to make sure the enemy champion can't straight up murder you, and you need wave clear of course. Proxying is the better option out of these 2 scenarios just because of the role quest interaction. It's not the only choice after a second wave crash though. If you're playing an aggressive early game champion and the enemy jungler is pathing bot, you can just let it bounce and force the enemy laner to walk up for farm before looking for a kill. There's also currently a cheese strategy where you can leech EXP from one minion mid, then run top for level 2 of the first wave. Don't forget, I've taught you how to counter this. Depending on the matchups you're playing, you won't always be able to execute these things. For example, level 2 proxying is pretty hard to do, and sometimes you might just end up fist fighting level 1. Just keep these things in mind in case you see a chance to do them. Now, let's talk about some notes on wave management before we finish up. Wave management is generally for the early game, since most champions can wave clear easily later on. In a very specific case though, in the mid to late game where you don't have TP up and an objective is coming up, you can kill all the minions except for the melees to slow push a wave. This creates a pushing wave and pressure someone has to answer while you 5v5 teamfights or delay. On the topic of TP aka teleport is essentially a crutch in the early game. If you find yourself getting chunked or die before they crash the wave, you can TP back and not lose as much. Another thing is that range top wave management also differs from melee wave management a fair amount, and this guide has mainly focused on melee wave management. League is also a constantly evolving game. You tend to get changes for each season. For example, in Season 15 we had cannon on 4th wave so you could not get the cheater recall off, but in Season 16 you have it on 3rd wave, so you can cheater recall. To add on to the minion talk, you'll find the optimal way of fast pushing a wave is to target the caster minions first. They have less HP and deal more damage than melee minions, so if you're in a rush, you follow through with this. For further reading, or I should say watching, check out the godfather/doctor of fundamentals, Alois. He has the best educational top 10 content by far. It is no question to debate. Lastly, I want to say that this video is far from perfect. This video is based on my own knowledge as a top laner and from watching other people play. Regardless, I hope it helps you out. Thanks for watching and have a good one. See you later.